Hey Revolutionaries, I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with Mike Trigg, where we're talking Bitflip and Burner. That's right, Bitflip and Burner. Now, I know you may not know what that means, but you're just going to have to listen to the episode, okay? I know that's why you're tuning in. You're going to listen anyways, but I just wanted to mention that, Mike has such an interesting story. He is a veteran of the Silicon Valley scene, worked at many startups, and cashed out, didn't cash out, has learned a lot. He really enjoyed being in the technology scene out there. But just a few years ago during COVID, realized his last startup that he was involved in was going south quick. And he thought, you know what, now's the time to scratch this itch, to lean into a passion that he's had a long time, and that is of being a novelist. And so he wrote his first full-length novel back that early 2021, and that's called Bitflip. And it's about the Silicon Valley experience and the scene and some of the maybe dark side that is that pops up from time to time out there. Anyways, he's got a great way of describing the technology and the impact of technology on society that we're all feeling. And that's why I thought he was so interesting to talk to and just to hear his story of reinvention, how he's pivoted into really being a full-time novelist now. And his latest novel is called Burner. And it's infused with the technology and social media things that are happening these days, along with politics. Now, I know there's nothing interesting happening in politics these days, but anyways, I can't wait to dig into some of his books here and for you to dig into it. But before we get there, real quick, I just wanted to mention that I know I haven't released an episode since I've been back from the Philippines, but I just have to give shout-outs and thank yous and to all the amazing people that were there and to all the amazingness that happened. It was a phenomenal event. So this was Podfest Asia that happened in May. I think it was May 8th or 10th. May 8th, I think it was, in the Philippines, in Manila this past year, just a couple months ago. And shout out to Chris Kremitzels. It was a sold-out event. Chris is the founder of Podfest and the organizer. And there were some big influencers that were there. Mikey Bustos, who's Filipino, who's originally from Canada, but he lives in the Philippines now. He was there. That was a big get for the conference. Wally Green was there from New York, a ping pong phenom, and he's got a great story of reinvention for himself. Gabe Aloisi was there, who's a big golf influencer. Of course, Aya Schlachter was there, who's the CEO of MGS Global and one of the sponsors of the conference. And I was there, of course. We all shared a panel at one point talking about podcasting, kind of the international people that were there. And we learned a lot. And the people in the Philippines were amazing. Oh, and by the way, Senator Pia was there. So if you're from the Philippines or know anything about the Philippines or the government of the Philippines, Pia is a loved politician there, and she was there, and that's a big deal. So thanks, Pia, for attending. And anyways, it was just a great event, and learned a lot about the Philippine scene over there, what's happening. There were a lot of editors and producers that showed up. So it was interesting. You could see sort of the lay of the land of the people from the U.S. For sure, other countries around the world like Australia and England, other sort of first world nations, they tend to outsource some of the blocking and tackling in terms of producing a podcast to the Filipinos out there, as well as there were some Filipino podcasters and influencers there. So it's just interesting to see the makeup, but I'd say about 2/3 of the conference attendees were on the production side, editing side. So that was neat to find out and see that they're super technical, super sophisticated. They know what's up. They know what they're doing, and super social media savvy. So that was really interesting to see. Anyways, it was a great trip, and then we hung out in Cebu a few days afterwards after the conference. So it was fun. It was great fun. Very impactful, I think, for the region over there. Learned a lot. Spotify's big over there, so they were at the conference and presented some of their data and information about who's listening to podcasts and how the podcast scene is growing over there. So that was super cool to see their information. Anyways, it was a great event. I would say look for it next year. Nothing's been announced for next year, but I have a feeling that it may be going on again. So, check the Podfest Expo website, and maybe you'll see you in January at Podfest Expo coming up in 2025. Who knows? But check it out. Anyways, just wanted to share that with everyone. Also, if you haven't checked out my Linktree yet, I'm just going to remind everybody that's where all you can find all the links for the show. Go to Linktree/JimJim99. JimJim99. That's my Linktree. So go to linktree.com, however you do it, however you spell it. It's spelled a little bit funkily. Everybody knows that out there. Linktree/JimJim99. You'll find all the links. And if you want to buy me a coffee with Ko-Fi, that link is there, Kofi. And that's also JimJim99 if you go directly to Ko-Fi. Anyways, buy me a coffee. Show your love for the show. I would really appreciate that. Just another reminder. But right now, let's get to Mike's episode. Mike Trigg with Bitflip and Burner.
Welcome to Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit JimJim'sReinventionRevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim Jim.
Hey everybody, hey, this is Jim Jim. Welcome to episode 114 of Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. I'm talking today with Mike Trigg, and we're talking Burner and Bitflip. Burner and Bitflip, yep. Yes, that's right. You'll find out what those two terms mean in a second here. So, Mike, welcome to the Reinvention Revolution.
Thanks for having me on, Jim. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Well, me too, because this might give it away, but I was just thinking about of all the people that I've had on. I think you might be the one sort of true writer that I've had on. I've had other people that have written books and have doing other things, been in the movie industry, but not novelists. I've had researchers that wrote books and business people that wrote books, but you're a true novelist, it sounds like. So sorry if I gave that away for everybody, but tell me what Burner and Bitflip means. So tell me what those terms are.
Those are the titles of the two novels I've published so far. My debut novel came out in 22, which is called Bitflip. As context, I was a tech entrepreneur for 20 plus years in Silicon Valley, but I'd always kind of wanted to write a novel and did so kind of during COVID. And that first book, Bitflip, was somewhat semi-autobiographical. It wasn't anything, it wasn't a memoir or anything, but it was kind of inspired from some of the actual events that I'd witnessed in my life. It's about a tech executive at a startup company who discovers possible fraud within the organization and sort of what to do about that. It's kind of a moral question and then a cultural commentary on the tech industry and tech culture. And then my second book, titled Burner, just came out in April, and it kind of merges my prior world of working on Capitol Hill as well as in the tech industry as well. It's kind of a political thriller that the protagonist is the anonymous leader of a online populist movement that sort of goes awry. And so like my first book, and really my lane as a writer, is to explore the impact of technology on modern life and kind of offer a critique of that.
I see. Well, I think that's why it's so amazing we made this connection, because I think people listening out there, that's part of the reason I believe they listen to the show, is they're like trying to figure out what is happening to our lifestyle or our planet or Earth or whatever with all this infusion of technology, and seems to be just getting just more and more integrated into our lives. And it's funny that both of these books here are very timely. And this reminded me, when I was kind of researching and thinking about things I was going to talk about with you, was in looking at Bitflip. So, Bitflip is out there on Amazon, people. And so I was, stalking Mike here in preparation for the podcast. And I'm just going to read this first sentence of the description of Bitflip here. It says, combining the corporate intrigue of Joseph Finder, the satirical cultural critique of Dave Eggers, and the domestic drama of Laura Dave, Bitflip is a fast-paced contemporary thriller that delivers authentic side view of corrupt influences of greed, entitlement, and vanity in technology startups. Okay, so we know what it's about, but it's interesting that you mentioned Dave Eggers here, because this goes back to on my way back from Asia. Goes back to 2020. I was in Asia right before the shutdown. I think I flew back from Thailand March 5th or 6th. And I had bought this book called The Circle by Dave Eggers.
Yeah.
Okay. And probably similar in maybe commentary or something. I don't know about the subject matter in regards to Bitflip. And I started reading. I'm like, man, this is a really good book. And what's funny about the story to me till this day is that I was reading it coming back on the flight from Asia, and I flew, I think Emirates or something like that. It was one of the Saudi airlines. I was flying back through Dubai, which I hadn't done before. I was a little bit nervous flying through that part of the world and flying on a new airline. I hadn't flown before, but it was like this really. And I bought the upgrade to business or first class because I was freaking out because everybody's going to be sitting close together on the plane. I'm like, you know what?
Oh yeah, good point.
I have extra money. I've saved money all my whole life, but this is the time to start using some of this money, right? Thinking I'm like, I don't really want to sit in a packed bus of 300 people sitting right next to each other. Anyways, so I buy the upgrade and I have this book and I don't know how to do it because I don't fly first class that often, and I have the book and it's got these lie flat seats or whatever, and through the flight I had lost the book. I don't know where the book went. Because I was like, you're sort of miscombobulated with covers and blankets or whatever. I'm like, well, maybe I'll find it when the plane lands or whatever. I just couldn't find it. And so the plane lands, and you have to bring your seat back up instead of lying flat. You got to bring it back up, right? And when I bring the seat back up, I realize, oh my God, the book got stuck on the side, down in the side of the seat.
Yeah.
And when I brought the seat back up, it kind of like crunched up and shredded the book a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, this book I was reading I really loved. And I was just kind of laughing at myself. And to this day, I have it on my TV stand in my living room. I haven't finished it yet. And it's completely crumpled.
It's a good book.
It's a great book. It completely crumpled or whatever. Anyways, the point is, I might be excited to read Bitflip because The Circle was a very good book. And if you're referencing it in regards to Bitflip, I'm like, you know what? This could be right up my alley. So people out there listening that have listened to the show, they know, what stuff I like, and I assume they like it as well. So,
yeah, Dave Eggers is a great writer, also based here in the Bay Area, and The Circle, the title refers to, a company called The Circle, which is kind of a mashup of all the companies you'd think, Facebook, Google, et cetera.
That's right.
And it's really well done. And it is a good comp. I think I know that he wrote a follow-up book to that called The Every, which was also good. And, in fact, The Circle, if you want to cheat, it was adapted to film. It wasn't a super successful film, but there is The Circle movie with Tom Hanks and, is it Emma Watson? I can't remember who the star of it is, but you can check it out on Netflix.
Well, it makes me want to go back and finally finish it, and maybe get bit too, because I was like, this is kind of interesting. It's kind of up my alley, and like I said, it's kind of timely. Like when these books came out, I think everybody was starting to feel like, for years Silicon Valley's been amazing, and obviously tech startups, going back to the early days of Microsoft and Apple and Hewlett Packard, and even before that. It's been a real technology engine, growth engine, great things for the U.S. to keep us, competitive or whatever. But there's always things can go awry and start feeling a little bit like, hey, this is maybe a little bit much here.
Well, I think I lived that firsthand. I on the theme of your podcast, Reinvention, I started my career. I was a history major. I started my career on Capitol Hill, as I mentioned. Spent several years out there. Grew a little cynical about politics and lobbying and money in politics in particular. And this thing, the information superhighway, was happening at the time, and I thought, oh, this tech, that's kind of perfect. That's a chance to both make the world a better place through tech invention, but also make money doing it. And I think, every tech company on the planet had, kind of make the world, some variation of making the world a better place is their motto.
Right.
And it was a very much have your cake and eat it too moment that drew me here. And I think you're right. Books like The Circle and just kind of our collective anxiety about tech, I think, started to grow through the post-dot-com bust and then into the 2010s and late teens. You first started to see this term big tech thrown around, right? Of this worry that we started to have about technologies sometimes insidious influence over our lives and our preferences and our beliefs. I think for many people, the 2016 election was a really stark example of technology being, abused and manipulated to influence, in that case, the outcome of a presidential campaign. So, I think since then there's been a growing awareness of that, and I think that we are right to have a collective skepticism about technology. I think that the outsized influence and power that the biggest tech companies especially enjoy, and the venture funded tech industry in particular has had a number of very negative consequences on life and culture. So, I think there are many, 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 and probably outnumber the good that tech has brought to our lives. It's really elevated, our economy. It's been a big driver of positive change too. But there's some negative things that we need to watch out for as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the commentary is, valid. We're all feeling it a little bit, and I think it's just sort of, dovetail with the sort of the internet at scale, and then the social media layer on top of that at scale. Now, this kind of, I think, the two things that kind of changed all of a sudden, kind of overnight in a way, where everybody's like, "Whoa, we can all have these conversations to talk to each other. It's great," but then realizing, wait, we're all on the same platform and the same conduit and the same channel. It's a little bit, interesting to think about. Yeah. Well, and also, like you said, the 2016 election comes around. So your second novel, Burner, again, is sort of timely in this regard of thinking about the challenges of the political influence in this time of technology, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, were you? I mean, obviously, we know the events that have transpired that may have inspired this, but were you always thinking this way in terms of, a political slant? I know in your background, you were thinking about maybe going into politics early on.
Yeah, it was a product of a lot of things. I was working on Capitol Hill during a very fraught time in politics then, the early 90s. Mm-hmm. We saw everything, again, both positive and negative things around that time. I think that's when you really did start to see the transition from mainstream media, where we all sort of got our news from a handful of outlets, and those outlets did their best to try and impartially report the news. I think around that time you saw the rise of talk radio. You saw, with the birth of the internet, an increasing siloing of the information that we got, right? And now all of a sudden it wasn't just sort of major media news outlets, it was everything. And as social media came of age, I actually was the head of marketing at a major social networking company at the time. And you started to see this, right? The innocent step that all the social networking companies did, notably Facebook and others, was, hey, we're an ad-supported business. Therefore, to make more money, we want you as users to be more engaged and spend more time on the site. And as they looked at the analytics of their platforms, they discovered that, the more you spoon-fed people, things that they already believed and liked, the more you kept them online. And so the kind of unintended consequence of that algorithm feeding us in our Facebook newsfeed is that we each kind of became, we each started getting different versions of the truth, effectively, right? We started getting information that really only validated what we already believed rather than challenged what we believed. And I think through 2016 and 2020 and January 6th and those sorts of events, it really, put a bright spotlight on the fact that there are, polarized tribes within America now that don't have a common sense of truth and reality, that have gotten their information from completely different sources. And I would argue many times those sources are trying to manipulate public opinion to their eventual goals. And so, this story, Burner, is fiction, obviously, but it borrows from a lot of contemporary events, everything from the GameStop short squeeze to January 6th to other kinds of things,
Right.
to show the dangers of that, right? If we don't, as a culture or society, believe in facts anymore, believe in our institutions anymore, only believe what's spoon-fed to us by, parties trying to influence what we think and what we do and what we believe, can lead to a very dangerous place. And that's the premise of the story, is that this movement has really spiraled out of control of the main character, Shane.
I gotcha. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right on in terms of just describing what's been happening. I look at it as growing pains of technology, of these new technologies that are being invented. We're going through some growing pains of like how to deal with it, how to react to it, how to figure it out. In the worst case, it's like you're right. You can be really misguided. In the best case, it's opening up voices of freedom around the world, et cetera, or pockets of things that we never would have understood or discovered. But there's growing pains around it, and so we got to figure it out. I think the positive message is that humans are adaptable, and that's what has helped us survive all these years. So I think we'll figure it out in the end, but yeah, don't get caught in the crosshairs in the meantime.
Well, I'm surprised we've made it this far in without mentioning AI. I mean, that artificial intelligence is another vector on this.
Right.
And I think it has understandably created a lot of anxiety, because I think we all already felt that technology was changing life faster than our reptilian brains could keep pace.
Right.
And now, you throw the accelerant of AI into the mix, and it really exacerbates challenges we've already had, which is what information is real. What can you believe if any politician can be manipulated into doing or saying, incriminating things through a generative AI, program? That's sort of terrifying. And it leads to a real sort of locking up of the human brain, of knowing what to think, knowing what information is credible, forming your own opinions. If you just feel like you can't trust anything you see or hear or read, that is poison to democracy. And I think that, it's well documented. Foreign influence campaigns have tried to exploit that, right? That has been a very consistent strategy from
I would say foreign and domestic. I mean, everybody knows.
Foreign and domestic.
Everybody knows
point. Yes, exactly.
It's a possibility, so everybody's trying something. I think.
Exactly. No, that's
for better or for worse.
That point is well taken.
Yeah. Well, you beat me to it. I did have this on the list of things to bring up to you in terms of. I found this term you said. I think from your somewhere on one of your websites, degenerate AI instead of generative AI. Degenerate AI. In this regard, but. I wanted to ask you in particular, since you're a writer, and this has to be affecting just the idea of writing a novel, I know songs you can just plug into stuff to ChatGPT and like, write me a song about this, write me a 1,000-page, paper on this, write me a 30,000-word novel on this topic with these characters. I mean, are you seeing this? Are you feeling the pinch, like personally here in terms of what you're doing?
I wouldn't say feeling the pinch, but it's definitely something that I'm aware of and tracking. I did a contributed post on Writer's Digest, which you can also find on my site, MikeTrigg.com, that explores this. Like, what is the impact of generative AI, ChatGPT on the writing profession?
Right.
And kind of the argument that I make in there's several things that authors and publishers are worried about AI doing. They're worried about it writing whole novels. They're worried about it putting them out of jobs. And all those things are valid concerns. But I actually happen to believe that the biggest threat, not only to writers, but to all creators and all product generators is discoverability. And by that I mean that right now, today, the way we discover just about anything that we're looking for is we go to Google and we enter a search term, right? And then Google sells ads on those search terms. So there's already a huge monetary incentive for Google to steer us towards the products and services of their advertisers versus discovering the thing that we actually are looking for. AI, and the reason there's so much clamoring between Microsoft and Google and Facebook and everybody else around this technology is AI. One of its great promises and potential is to break that, to help us as consumers navigate the world of information, products, and services. And if we're trusting an AI algorithm to tell us what to read, what to listen to, what to watch, which we increasingly are every day, then the ability for an independent author to get discovered is diminished dramatically.
I'm not sure I follow you there. What's the difference between, like you say, like give me authors that write about this stuff into Google, and give me authors that write about that stuff into an AI. What's the difference?
It's all about the ad incentive and the decision-making ability, right? The decision with AI shifts from you, the consumer, to the AI algorithm and the advertisers feeding that AI algorithm, deciding what you're going to read next. The example that's probably easiest to illustrate the point would be
Meaning that you can't
what
see
to
it.
watch.
Meaning that you can't see it. So, like when you search something on Google,
No, it's fed
you
to
see
you.
the
It's
ad
fed to you.
first, right? But then you see the organic results. Are you saying this
Right,
distinction
right.
would not be found in AI results?
That's right. Think about how you discover content probably on Netflix or Apple or Amazon or other streaming services, for example. It's what to watch next, right? There's incredible power in the feed,
Yeah.
in telling you,
Yeah.
and instead of you deciding what you want to watch, see, read, think, do, the AI algorithm, will tell you what to read, think, see,
Right. That's
believe,
happening
do.
already, though, right?
It's happening already, exactly.
Yeah.
And my point is that with AI, I think it's going to happen even faster, even across more categories. That one of the term for it is the paradox of choice. One of the most overwhelming things about being a modern consumer is
Yeah.
unlimited
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
And so any opportunity that we have to unburden ourselves from free thought, free evaluation of
Right.
unlimited choices
Something
is
that's less
just tell me
taxing on our
what to
brains.
read.
Yeah.
Just tell me what to watch. Just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen over the internet is really kind of counterintuitive. So far, you pre-internet, you would have said, hey, gosh, with unlimited access to whatever it is, what books, movies, art, music, TV shows, etc., you would think that we would become more diverse in what we see, read, and look at. The opposite has kind of happened. All of these industries have really sort of concentrated into chasing super hits. And I believe that the AI era will amplify that even more. Our attention is already being sold to the highest bidder, and now our decision making is being sold to the highest bidder. And I think that's a very pernicious thing. I actually think that is one of the areas that, if I were the FTC chairman, I would very much look at.
Okay. I'm not sure what you do about it or how. I think maybe we're more aware of it. Where previous generations, we probably just weren't aware of it. Like we were happy to only watch the 3 TV channels and assume this must be truth.
Right.
It's 100% true.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to think
You
about
know
it.
what I mean? Like
Right.
we just never even knew to question it, basically.
Yeah.
So we were happy about it. Yeah, I'm kind of I don't have any strong inkling either way in terms of being positive or negative on it. I think it just is what it is. But that's me as an engineer, technology guy. That these are tools. It's for whatever you want to do with this tool. You can kill people with hammers, or you can build houses with hammers.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I am not a doomsayer about AI or technology in general at all. I've spent my career in that industry, and I think you're right. It's every technology has, nefarious applications, and it has incredibly, life-changing applications. So, it's just more, and I think you're right. I think raising people's awareness, I believe we will have other attempts at manipulating our collective belief system, consciousness, et cetera, at hacking that. And I'd hate for us to be misled again. I think we need to be vigilant about the information that we, see, read, hear,
Right.
and not, and come with it with a measure of skepticism,
Yeah,
because
I
we
agree. Well, I
need
think
that.
the awareness is now here. I think that's what we're feeling.
Yeah,
That we're actually
yeah,
aware, maybe for the first time in history, super aware.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Versus like just believing that religion and be quiet. Um, yeah, I think, and to me, that's like the growing pains of like, oh man, we're in some growing pains here, and it's going to be maybe a little ugly for a little bit longer, but hopefully it gets sorted out. We'll see. I'm a techno optimist in this regard, but
Yeah.
okay, so but let's talk a little bit about how you got here, because I think
Yeah.
that's one of the interesting things about your story, or about the reinventions you'd be able to make. Like, I think you're helping people in the moment with your writing, process how our culture and the world's being reinvented. But what got you on this track of writing yourself? Because you weren't writing before. You're working in industry.
Yeah, well, it was always kind of a latent interest of mine. I took a creative writing course in undergrad and really enjoyed it. Sort of always had this bucket list item of write a novel. And the genesis of my first book was honestly like, conversations at the dinner table with my wife about funny stories from my day or little anecdotes. And she would tell me, gosh, you should write a book. This is interesting stuff. It kind of would give people insight into how Silicon Valley really works. And I started doing that. I started kind of capturing these things. I didn't really have much of a story to it. My lifeline for turning it into my first novel was The Hero's Journey. I don't know if you're familiar with this template. It dates back to Greek
I know the
times.
term.
And it's kind of this.
I kind of have an idea what it is. Yeah, but
Yeah, yeah. You can look it up on Wikipedia if you're interested in it. But it once you learn it and understand it, you kind of see it everywhere. From Star Wars to The Hobbit to everything in between. And so that was really helpful for me as a first-time writer. It was kind of the combination of write what you know, which I'd been in the tech industry, and having this template to kind of guide the overall story structure. And so I started writing it, and I was about 100 pages in, trying to do it while I was doing another tech startup. And COVID happened, and I realized, that the startup I was working on wasn't going to make it. We were going to have to pivot and raise more money, and we decided, along with the existing investors, to just wind it down. And it was at that moment that I thought, hey, I'm already sequestered at home with no income. I'm halfway to being a writer.
yeah.
I might as well
Right.
jump in on and do this for
So
full.
having no income prepared you to be a writer. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. It's a critical prerequisite.
Yeah.
And so I did it. I was fortunate that my wife was continuing to work through that period of time, so that was able to afford my indulgence in jumping into writing full time. But I really enjoyed it. I got that first book published, and just kind of had the bug from there. And I've published a second book. I've got a third book written. I've got a fourth book in development. So
Wow.
it's something I've really really enjoyed.
Well, how did you? So this is interesting to me. Again, for people listening out there that are trying to maybe do something different themselves, how did you go about learning this? Like, having a passion for it or thinking it's
Yeah.
fun, that's cool and everything, but writing a book and publishing it and releasing it and marketing it and doing all the other things around it that have gotten you to this level where you have this level of notoriety, et cetera, out there. How did you know about how to do that? Not being a novelist, initially.
Yeah, it's a tricky world, especially in the sort of the era we live in with publishing right now,
Mhm.
where it used to be the writer was just the writer,
Right.
and the promotion and the publicity and everything else that happened after publishing the book was handled by the publisher, by somebody else. Now, even authors with big five publishing deals, the onus is really on them to do a lot of the promotion and publicity work around their own novels. And so I think the modern novelist needs to not only be a good writer, but also be good at promoting their work, getting visibility, building an author platform, as they say in the business, for you and your writing, building up a fan base. That's all part of the mix now. And you asked about the pivot from being an entrepreneur to being a novelist. When I first embarked on it, I really thought, this is a complete 180. This couldn't be more different than what I was doing before. Mm-hmm. And as I really got into it, I realized, no, this is actually almost the exact same thing I was doing before. That's the right. Difference is, before it was code, now it's words on a page. But in both cases, you're kind of creating something out of nothing. You have to have a vision for what it is you're doing. You have to identify and bring on board the additional talent you need. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But, designers and editors and publishers and publicists and all those sorts of, writing the novel is a singular endeavor, but getting it through all the phases necessary to be a book requires a group of people. Just like an entrepreneur, you got to convince that, those people to back you and to support you and to help you. A lot of the promotional stuff is very similar as well. You're out there buying ads and hiring PR people and doing those types of things to try and get your name and your novel out there. And so I discovered as I got into it, no, this is very similar muscle groups to starting a company, early stage starting a company. And I think that was part of what I also enjoyed about the process was, I'm an early stage startup person. I love the jolt or rush of energy you get from creating an idea out of thin air. And, I've been able to do that as a second act here with novels instead of apps.
That's great. Well, yeah, in a way you're prepared for maybe this time in history, honestly, right? Where it's like I feel like you need to keep reinventing yourself. Obviously, this is nothing new in history, but it just seems like things are moving so fast now, and there's so many opportunities. I think because of it as well, that to go out there and grab something and pivot, and especially like from a certain industry or at a certain age now. I mean, years ago in the 20th century, people might think, "You're insane, Mike. What are you talking about? You're going to be a novelist now? That's crazy. Go back to work."
Right.
But now it's kind of like, you know what? Yeah, this is amazing. The opportunities there. You can educate yourself. I think. Thanks for sharing that, because I think people need to hear that message of like, oh, yeah, I can do this. This can be done.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the financial realities behind that, right? I alluded to earlier, my wife has continued to work through this. I am incredibly grateful to her. I'm not able to, if I were the lone breadwinner for our family, I would not be able to do that on my writing alone, right? And so, I think in the other thing that's changed societally is, many people are dual income couples, and that affords both spouses the chance to explore passions. And my wife and I have been able to do that over the years. There have been stretches where I've worked where she hasn't, and vice versa. And, that is a luxury that, again, generations ago may have been harder for people to pursue those passions because the financial realities of, paying your rent and or your mortgage and putting food on the table just, trumped those passions or those things you were interested in pursuing.
Yeah, so, definitely.
I think that's take advantage of that, nurture that, be in a partnership with your spouse or partner that allows you each over the course of your lives to have these offshoots, have these opportunities to reinvent, because the reinvention period is the rocky one financially, right? That's when you before you get into your new lane fully, that lane change moment is the kind of the oh shit moment for people.
Right. It's like, am I going to make it or not? Am I going to make this merge or not?
Right. I've got my blinker on.
Right. Exactly. I'm trying to get over it, but I don't know if I'm going to make it for real. Well, that's a great point. And it sounds like, that you do have a great partnership because of that. Because you've both had your chance to reinvent yourselves, and that keeps everything fresh and whatever
Yep.
within a relationship. So that's another nuance to the story there.
Yep.
Well, you know what? This reminded me of this other question I was going to ask you because you're in Silicon Valley, you've been out there in California, you've been working in startups, you've had a few. It sounded like there's a few that of your businesses that got bought, et cetera. And I was going to ask you whether you were able to quote cash out in this regard, being a part of that scene out there. And also, I saw in your background that because of your knowledge and experience and the people that you know out there, that you've been into angel investing and in this regard, and how
Yeah.
that has worked out for you. So that's something that's just a personal interest of mine. I've gotten into angel investing maybe about 5 or 6 years ago now. Some things have worked out great. Some things have just gone to zero. But I was just curious of what your experience of being someone from that's closer physically to that the Silicon Valley area, how that's worked out
Yeah.
for
Well, I'll start with the first part of your question, which is just sort of that journey. I mean, I probably have worked for, I don't know, a dozen companies over the 20 plus year
Right.
career I had in Silicon Valley. I worked at big companies, small companies. I worked at software companies and hardware companies. And yes, some of those had successful exits, and I was able to make some money off those, but many of them were miserable failures. And in fact, one of the interesting things, especially for software companies, is because they have so little debt,
you? Yeah.
it's hard to kill a software company, right? It's easy when you see the Chapter 11 filing on the horizon to jump ship. And it's easy to stay on board when you see the IPO filing. But a lot of companies, probably 95% plus of startups get into that kind of, I've sometimes described it as zombie mode, where
Not really
they're
growing,
doing
but it's there.
okay. What's that?
It's not really growing, but it's there. It's sort of like
Correct.
yeah.
And the biggest expense for a software company is its employees. So I've had the challenge of going through situations where, we'd had to reduce staff and get the company profitable, and then you're profitable, which you think is a good thing, but for tech valuations, it's often a bad thing, right?
Correct,
If you're not
yeah.
growing,
Right.
growth is the only thing that matters for tech valuations.
Right.
And so profitability is all but irrelevant. And so you can be profitable, even growing, but modestly growing company, but nobody kind of gives a shit. You're not able to really go public based on that. You're often not able to sell the company based on that.
Right.
And those companies can wither on the vine for years and years and years. There are companies that I worked for, nearly 15, 20 years ago that are still, to my amazement, around,
Okay,
that are
interesting.
still kicking.
Yeah.
Just because they're able to pay their IT costs and the limited number of employees, but they're not really going anywhere. So I really beat myself up about that early on. I think I had some early successes in as I first got into the tech industry. What I didn't realize is we were in a massive .com bubble, right? Things seemed easy when you could put .com behind anything and go sell it for billions of dollars. I felt like, that sort of success should come easily. I think I didn't appreciate or knew, but didn't think it applied to me, the incredibly long odds of being successful and starting a company. And that actually is a lot of what I wrote into the central character, Sam Hughes, in the book Bitflip. He, like I did, had an ambition, a desire to be successful in Silicon Valley, and that desire ends up really pushing him into moral gray zones and even not gray zones, into moral corruptness.
Dark side.
Without even realizing it. And I think that is a real danger in a society, in a culture like Silicon Valley's, where there's so much value placed on, the exit, the big, IPO or big acquisition. And you can kind of lose your moral compass. It's easy to do. And I've seen it happen to a lot of people. I've seen it sort of mind wobble itself. And so I wanted to write sort of a cautionary tale about that possibility. To the second part of your question, my as I mentioned, my wife's worked. She's had good successes. We've both had opportunities to, it's so boom and bust, right? You sometimes, you can get these great outcomes, and of course, the media is full of stories about companies where, the lowliest administrative assistant, made millions of dollars on the stock. Those are truly, once in a million kind of outcomes. More often it's modest wins along the way, and you get a little liquidity here and there, and you earn some salary. For us, we've benefited from the real estate market in Silicon Valley, which is, we barely were able to afford that first home, but that's probably the asset in our portfolio that's grown faster than just about anything else.
Oh, yeah.
And so by long-winded way of getting to your second part of your question about angel investing, we've been fortunate enough to have a little money to do some small investments. But my wife and I both view that as something that we do almost as much for mentoring or giving back to the community as it is to sort of make money on our own. I think angel investing is extremely difficult to make money on. You often get diluted because you're an early investor. And so even if the thing is successful, you've got such a minuscule, portion of the pie by the time the thing goes. It takes years. It takes a decade plus, right? If you're investing in an early stage company, it's literally going to be a 10-year time horizon. So, you can measure and look at milestones along the way. One of the companies I invested in just did their Series A, and so you're like, that's awesome. They got to Series A. Yeah. That's a great milestone. Whether they get to an exit for my investment, I have no idea. But most of the dozen or so investments we've made have been people we've known, people we really liked, where we thought the business was intriguing. And it's kind of a way, it's not, we've got an investor's stake. It's not purely philanthropic, but we view it as, wanting to help those people. And we both look at mentors and advisors and people who helped us along the way in our earlier stage of our career. And we like, the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, thanks for sharing that perspective, because I think that especially the earlier stage that you get in, I think what you're saying is probably more important, or the best way to look at it, in terms of like, hey, I want to help this. The technology is interesting, but you have no idea whether it's going to be successful, really. So you're really betting on the people or trying to help the local scene or whatever it might be. So, that's interesting. I'm kind of like, I'm trying to figure it out for myself. Like I said, I've been kind of doing it for maybe 5 or 6 years, which is not the longest yet. Keeps me interested in technologies, and that's kind of why I do it. I'm just interested in seeing how things work and continuing to understand the world. So I like looking at how these early startups think about going about the business that they're in, but then going about marketing their business. The whole thing that swirls around it, is kind of interesting to me.
Completely.
It's informative in some ways. Well, anyways, thanks for sharing that. Just a little personal interest of mine.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Like I said, people listening out there, they listen for a reason. So I guess, because of my certain interest here and there. Well, look, there's always one or two questions I like to ask people before we finish the episode here. And one is usually about technology, but I think you shared your views or concerns or commentary. So I want to remind people that Burner and Bitflip are both out there. So you can hear more of Mike's thoughts in that regard, certainly in those things. But what I wanted to ask you is, instead of asking about technology and how you think about it, is what are you feeling urgent about? So I feel like sometimes when there's anxiety out there and people are just restless or something or whatever, or trying new endeavors, what comes to mind that feels like it's urgent for you these days?
I'd probably return to AI. I think that having lived through the dot-com boom and bust, I'm sort of eager or urgent, or have a sense of urgency around the AI boom and bust, right? We're in the boom phase right now, clearly. I get pitches every day from, we mentioned angel investing. People will reach out and it's like, there are zero that don't have AI in them somewhere, right? They are all AI-centric pitches and ideas. And that's where the money's flowing. Understandably, that's where, you look at, this is the case even in the largest public companies, right? I mean, Apple was beaten up over its lack of AI strategy until they came out with Apple Intelligence at WWDC. NVIDIA, the GPU chip maker, is now the most valuable company in the world, based on the fact that they make chips for AI. So we're indisputably, I'd say, in an AI boom period. There will be an AI bust period, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
The inevitability, the curve for every new technology ever.
We're just in the hype
back to
cycle. We're in the hype cycle right
back
now.
to the printing press is the hype cycle.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's sort of we know what will happen next.
That's right.
There's a lot of overinvestment happening right now. Many of those companies will fail miserably. They'll burn through their cash, never find a market. The term AI will no doubt at some point become, like .com became a little cynical, a little poisonous
Right.
as the fallout starts to happen. But then, after you get through that trough of the hype cycle, that's when real value starts to be created, right? That's when the winners and losers get shaken out. You get a better sense of how AI can be beneficial to individuals and businesses who are going to spend money on it. And so I think I'm just sort of eager, or have a sense of urgency to your question about sort of getting through that hype cycle. I think it is going to probably be another year or two. It might correlate, the bust might correlate, likely will correlate with shakeout in the market, the larger economy as a whole. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one. The other area that I have a sense of urgency is, kind of on the topic of this second book, Burner. I wrote it thinking that it would be almost retrospective of like, hey, here's how society can be manipulated. Oh, good thing that doesn't happen anymore. I have a sense of urgency, and I don't even have language to really describe this, but I feel like our reaction to a lot of stuff has been more cynicism, more skepticism, more distrust of institutions and individuals and of the democratic form of governance. Mm-hmm. And that gives me a strong sense of urgency and worry. I think that's very dangerous. I think that historically, I was a history major, that's what tips into authoritarianism. I think we've seen a real uptick of authoritarianism around the world, including in our own country. Dictators, if you look through history, dictators don't just take control on their own. Dictators are given power by the populace.
Yeah, they're given power. And exactly. That's the right phrase.
Exactly.
Like we're letting these people do these things.
Correct. And so we need to be vigilant about that. We need to, I would love to see more initiatives around authenticity, because I do think it's wonderful that information is spreading and we can each, get information so easily from anywhere, anytime. But that also opens it to manipulation, right? And so having a better way for us as consumers of information to judge the authenticity, credibility of different news sources and information and echoers and amplifiers of that information will really be helpful to us, right? If we can feel more confident about the information that we're getting and its reliability, that enables us to not check out of the democratic process and throw our arms up and be frustrated as sort of the prevailing emotions are right now, but be confident, have a sense of truth and justice and fairness and lean into those things as active members of a democracy, rather than doing what I see too many people doing, which is just kind of, again, checking out.
Yeah. Well,
or throwing their arms up in frustration.
Yeah, it's all out there. You're very descriptive. I can tell it makes me want to look at your books a little even closer. because
they're all out there.
You're very eloquent in terms of the way you're describing it, and it's the truth. It's two sides of the coin. Like it's all there. It's all there happening.
Yep.
And it makes me like, I don't think there was this meme like still going around a little bit maybe, but like maybe 6-8 months ago, a year ago, about the Roman Empire and are we at the end of the empire here in the United States and those kinds of things. And and again, if you zoom out, you realize what technology certainly can be an accelerant to the process or whatever it is, but this is just human stuff going on, and it's just historical, like you said, and it's like we got to watch out for it, because we could be at the end of at the end of an empire, or maybe creating a new one. I don't know. Who knows?
I'll tie it back to the theme of your podcast, Reinvention. That is America's superpower. Yeah. America's strength as a nation from its founding to today is our collective ability to reinvent ourselves, right? We are a nation comprised of people who reinvented themselves, right? Who came here seeking a better life. And I firmly believe Americans have a deep-seated sense of justice, fairness, opportunity. The founding principles of our nation and the people who populate our nation over generations from all over the world have come here to reinvent. And that is incredibly powerful. It's been what's sustained us for a long time. And I believe it's what'll, keep us ahead of the rest of the world, and being willing to reinvent, adjust, do some creative destruction where needed. We're not afraid of change, and we're not unwilling to do what's needed to be done at an individual level or at a national level to affect that change. And that's what makes me an America optimist, a democracy optimist.
Right. Well said. Once again, well said, man. I appreciate that. And that's a perfect analogy. I didn't even think about it that way, but you're right. It's, America is a place of reinvention itself, really. Historically. I mean, that's, we're still running the experiment here.
Yep.
So, hey, Mike, thanks for being on. For people that want to learn more about the books you got going on, or your new releases, or more about you personally, where would you send them?
My author website, MikeTrigg.com with 2 G's, is a great place to start. My books, of course, are, as you mentioned, available on Amazon, but I always encourage folks to order from their local bookstore. You should be able to find both novels. Just go to your favorite website. They may not have it in inventory in stock, but you can always find it on their website and order it. They're also both available in audiobook. I'm a huge fan of audiobooks. I listen to a ton of them. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are pretty good you listen to a lot of stuff. And the audiobook version of Burner just came out last week. So encourage people to get that on Audible, Apple Books, or Amazon. So
I see. Okay, great. One last question. Okay, I can't stop talking.
Yeah,
talking
we could go all day.
Okay, we could go all day, but one more last question. When you do your audiobooks, how do you do them? Who's the voice of the audiobook? Do you hire actors? Do you hire voiceover people? What is it, or is it yourself?
No, I with the first book, again, because it is somewhat autobiographical, I started out, curious, hey, could I record this myself? I got this microphone that I'm talking into today to try and create a high quality recording. I quickly realized that narrating an audiobook is a distinct skill set that I do not possess whatsoever.
Right.
I really, the well done audiobooks, they're actors, right? The best people do it are trained actors, and they do all the voices, and it's just, and they do it so expertly and subtly that you almost don't even notice it, right? But they need to give you those little prompts that you get in punctuation of voices and perspectives and sense of setting and scene and character. And this latest novel, both are available in audiobooks, but this latest one that I did, we worked with 3 different voice actors because there are 3 first-person narratives through the story.
Okay.
And it was just an unmitigated joy to have this come to life. It was so interesting to me as the author to hear how these talented actors portrayed the characters and brought them to life, auditorially. It was just a treat. And I am thrilled with how the audiobook turned out. I think it's really, really, really well done. And shout out to, I don't have time to thank them all now, but they're in the credits there, the actors who brought it to life.
Right. Awesome. Well, amazing. Cause that's another whole set of skills to develop for yourself, is figuring out how to produce an audiobook, how to hire the right people, how to get the right flavor of it that gets your, voice across. Amazing. Okay. Anyways. All right. It's time to get out of here. Mike, thanks again. And we'll catch up later soon.
Thank you, Jim. Great talking with you today.
Yep. Thank you for listening to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. See you next time. And remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey, revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it and will help others find the same value that you found.